Hi, welcome back. I am clairvoyant, meaning I'm a seer of things invisible to the eye. My name is Victor, the author of the Fire Soldier series of novels. Well, for those who have been here long enough, you've come to understand that I write in first person. That is to mean that when I say I, you will own that I'm indeed the protagonist in the series. So that every little thing that Mr. John Taylor sees, does, experiences, passes through my very own mind. Now, mind, that is not to say the fact that Dr. John Taylor appears to possess what's known as extrasensory perception abilities means that in reality I do have these abilities. No, not at all.
A waitress in Honolulu. She was Hawaiian, a native of Hawaii. She said that she always saw the death of her relatives in the newspaper before it happened.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is just but a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, organizations, events, and incidences are all products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or otherwise, is purely coincidental. But today's events shall not pass without going back in history for the purpose of observing how a simple set of cards, originally called the Zener cards, came to be known as the ESP cards presently. In the 1930s, at Duke University in North Carolina, a man called J.B. Ryan and his wife right, and voila, that's where ESP comes in. So, long story short, ESP is essentially called the sixth sense and is claimed to be a paranormal ability pertaining to reception of information not gained through the organized physical senses, but rather sensed with the mind. This term was adopted by Duke University psychologist J.B. Ryan to denote psychic abilities such as intuition, telepathy, and clairvoyance. Well, abilities that John Taylor, the protagonist in this series, appears to possess. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before I pick from where I left in episode number 21, let me reiterate that this is just a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, organizations, events, and actual incidences, I beg your pardon, and incidences are all products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead or otherwise, is purely coincidental. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's proceed from where I left in the previous episode. But of course, said Jake, the surgeon tells me he has emailed you details already. Should you have any opposition contrived to reconcile his position to your defense, sir? Do we have an understanding? I grieve to say, gentlemen, replied the professor, that under normal circumstances, I furnish myself with emails at 7 sharp, never mind why. My watch ticked 5 to 7. The hour hand slayed time so ruthlessly it left illusions of time wasted chasing the weed. 5 minutes remain, sir, I said. I figured it out already, he turned. I'll undertake the errand in your favor, you skunks. Sir, Jake interposed, we've got names. Of course, Jake was not pleased by the fact that Professor Wilhelm called them skunks. So he undertook to tell them they've got names, okay? Those funny aliases are what you call names, replied Professor Wilhelm. Child's play. I'll assume you've none. The man Professor Wilhelm fixed his eyes on was a man who had been initiated 9 years ago into the kind of ego that was the corollary to an STM militant. His name was Mr. John Taylor, if that tickles you. Mr. Professor, responded Jake, lowering the tips of his fingers on the table and running them along the edges. I declined renewal of such forebodings. I held firm to Mason's stand, which was mine also, that by no.23 Professor Gutenberg possessed magnificent wit and a brilliant memory to correspond with, and that he was an excellent man who would have managed any woman between his sheets. From plain facts that could only be observed by men of superior experience, these were the deductions we drew. Guys, interposed Professor Wilhelm, going to our service with bottles of wine. And now for your nerves. You get a serving of the finest from my cellar. A flash of delight that was seen to have evidently propagated into Mr. Bench brightened his dark-rimmed eyes. The same delight extended as tribute to alcoholic addiction was ingrained into me. The impulses of my soul were not to be ignored. Like myself, Mr. Bench worshipped alcohol. The next reflection I derived from my ESP reservoir, in the meantime, staggered. Apparently, another guest had been hosted in that same house the previous day. The gentleman, Mr. Franklin Spearman by name, if you will, a manger penitentiary of the Holy See at St. Petersburg, Rome, and apparently Professor Wilhelm Gutenberg's twin brother, had flown back to Italy the previous day after a short visit. I'll check my mails now, said Wilhelm, snatching at a file and taking a glass of wine with him. The file in hand, he motioned past me. Fine, said Jake. He walked across the room, made through some door on the left and returned after a while. In his hand was a little tulip Ego diamond laptop in a chrome protective casing. Affecting to turn it on, he perched himself to his seat. I watched him. We all did. As he managed his email inbox, I heard the hurry of footsteps from a chamber before us. The door beside the fireplace opened. A pretty blue-eyed blonde approached. In her hand, she balanced a tray of coffee. No word was spoken. It was pernicious to spy at her magnificence. Her smile was heaven. When she offered to shake my hand, there was something thrilling in the trembling she impressed on my lips that almost knocked me out at the table. I swear I would have consumed whatever coffee she had brewed that morning if she would have let me. The name she went by was Evie Amanda. She undertook to the merits of some of us. I have got one email from Sergeant Green, gentlemen, said Professor Gutenberg. I'll read it aloud if you please. Go ahead, said Jake. The email went thus. Professor Dr. Wilhelm Gutenberg, on behalf of the Shine Tango movement, I venture to introduce 8 gentlemen to you. John Taylor, RXC 2346HX, aka Todd 64. Mr. Jake Daniels, Captain Mohammed James Blunt, Alexander Thicket, Mr. Chris Coons, Jerry Sparta, Dawson Miles, and the Ace Man. Sir, it should be noted that by the time you are in receipt of this email, 4 combat fighting men should be at your private command. You ask who they are. They shouldn't take any trouble. Now come, discover them. Ladies and gentlemen, an email is dropped into Professor Wilhelm Gutenberg's inbox, and this introduces 8 gentlemen to him. The sender is one Mr. Howard Green, and that marks the end of my today's episode. Please hit the subscribe button below to support the channel. Goodbye.